Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, we look at land and how we decide how it's used.
I don't actually feel some kind of innate duty to produce food. I am a land manager, and if I want to be asked to look after things for nature or the local community as well as producing food, I am very comfortable having a blend of activities on my land.
While farmers brace for higher fuel and fertilizer prices as ships are attacked in the Middle East, suppliers tell us,
don't panic, talk to us. The likelihood is this will plateau, this will ease.
And we report on the first UK trial of a bird flu vaccine.
We're doing the study in turkeys, but we absolutely will be looking at all species when we consider how do we use these tools going forward.
And hear from the farmer who's testing it out.
This is a momentous day, and this is really the start of what will hopefully be the end of this devastating disease that we've all suffered from over the last 20 odd years.
More on all that later. Let's start, though, with the science of cheese. The Calver family in Somerset installed a cheddar-turning robot in their cheese cave 10 years ago. It was a world's first. We made a programme about it. Well, Theo White has been back to visit the farm, and the robot is still going strong, as are the family, who, he discovered, are now making ricotta, mozzarella and raw milk cheddar as well.
I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's like a hay confetti cannon that's being sprayed over your cows to relay the floor.
Yeah, they're really happy. That one there just munching away. We've recently changed from sand bedding to ground up straw because actually it's kind of got more biology in it, I suppose. Because we're raw milk cheese producers, everything that we're trying to do is to improve the quality and flavour of the milk, which in the long run actually improves the quality and flavour of the cheese.
So, biology in the straw right now, how does that affect the flavour of the cheese?
As cheesemakers, what we're trying to do, we're trying to actually create acidity, and how we do that is we have lactobacilli bacteria that converts the lactose, the sugars in milk, into lactic acid. That's your preservative. Where does that lactobacilli bacteria come from? It comes from the environment. It's stuck on grass, on straw, on hay. So that whole environment around the farm can have a positive or maybe negative effect on the quality and the diversity of the microbiome that's going into the milk. What we're trying to do is create the idea of terroir, like getting a flavour of a specific place in a moment of time.
And you can hear more from Tom Calver in On Your Farm. That's here on BBC Radio 4 tomorrow morning at 6:35. Now, all week on our sister programme, Farming Today, we've been looking at land and its uses. It's seen as the answer to some of the big questions faced by society: cutting greenhouse gas emissions by generating renewable energy, building new homes to ease the housing crisis, making space for nature to halt the collapse of wildlife numbers, and farming to feed the nation. The problem is that land is a finite resource, so the debate over which land should be used for what purpose is becoming increasingly charged. The government is hoping to take some of the heat out of the discussion and provide much-needed clarity. It's already consulted on a land use framework for England, and the final version is due to be published soon. Dr. Stephen Emery is Senior Lecturer in the Sociology of Agriculture at Exeter University.
Well, we've seen lots of different new requirements, and particularly legally binding requirements, coming through from government. Primarily these relate to biodiversity commitments, so the requirement to enhance the conservation and management of protected sites across 30% of the land area of the country, and also the commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, much of which is being targeted at land use changes to achieve that target.
Now, this is where farmers get worried, because they think if we're going to reach all those targets, if we reckon that about 63% of England's land is agricultural at the moment, to meet the targets you could lose up to 9% to woodland or peatland restoration. So have farmers got a point that food security might take a hit here?
Yes, I think so. So what the land use framework effectively did was to say, what do we need to change away from agricultural production in order to meet our other obligations, without really looking seriously at how food production itself should change?
Presumably, though, once they release it, they could put that in, if you see what I mean.
We would hope so, yeah, and I imagine that is exactly the sort of thing that farmers are going to be looking for. If you combine the two highest categories of land use change that the government identified in the land use framework, it's approximately 9% of land is deemed to be going out of agricultural production altogether. Add on another 5%, which is still going to be farmed, but primarily for environmental and climate reasons. That gives us 14% at a national level. And this brings us back to the point of regional disparities, because if we're protecting the highest value agricultural land, which the land use framework says it will do, that means that the actual changes of land away from agricultural production in some regions are going to be far higher than 14%, and in other areas far less. So I think what the government hopefully will be doing is looking at how we actually manage resilience at the local and regional level, and thinking more in an integrated way about how food production, not just in terms of how much food we can produce, can we produce enough food, but the way we want to produce food.
We're going to talk about solar farms. Building larger scale solar farms on agricultural land is something which is generating a lot of local protest in some areas. How might a land use framework help decide those sorts of issues?
It will really depend upon how it filters down to the local level. When we're talking at a national level, the figures for kind of house building, infrastructure development, which include things like solar and other renewables, they're less than 1% of land use change. So when you look at it nationally, it doesn't seem like it should be a large concern, and it's almost passed over. But obviously that does not mean that at the local level the impacts are much more significant and much more real.
Dr. Stephen Emery from Exeter University, and we'll examine the details of the government's land use framework for England when the final version is published. Well, as we mentioned there, solar farms are a source of disputes in some rural communities. So how do farmers and landowners with tenants view this issue? Norfolk County Council has more than 20,000 acres in tenancy farms. It recently decided that none of its tenants would be permitted to allow solar panels on their land, although they would be encouraged to put the panels on farm buildings. At the Norfolk Farming Conference, Anna Hill asked Councillor Fabian Eagle, Cabinet Member for Economic Growth at Norfolk County Council, to explain their thinking.
We do not want to see us removing tenants to enable large-scale solar farms across Norfolk. We've already got the potential now of having 25,000 acres of Norfolk being removed for large-scale solar, and we're not prepared as a county council to take 16,000 acres of our land, which we do actually tenant farm, to make sure that goes into solar panels.
Some tenants might say, well, I would quite like solar panels on my farm buildings, so it's not a blanket no.
No, it's not blanket, but what we're really concerned about is Norfolk has always been proud to feed the nation, and then suddenly we seem to be put down that we're just going to, you will still supply food, but we want all that power. You're going to produce that power, and it's going to go to the rest of the country, such as London. We don't have the right power sources and outlets to power our areas. So there's got to be a payback to Norfolk people, making sure they've got the power to make sure we have still got a vibrant and successful economy, and that we keep to our roots of being an agricultural area as well.
Councillor Fabian Eagle from Norfolk County Council. Henry Astor runs Bruin Farms in the Cotswolds. He was offered the chance to put solar panels on his land, but turned it down.
Until every roof in this country is saturated with solar panels, we should not be putting green and pleasant lands under solar panels. We need to talk about the larger picture of energy security. I'm afraid that my children will be dealing with the mess that these solar panels, in recycling them, I hear they're not very recyclable, down the road. So no, I think until we've built, first of all, a national grid that actually works, we should not be investing so heavily, or certainly covering fields with solar panels.
You can see it's quite tempting, can't you, for a farmer to say, I will get a fixed income for a certain period?
Yes, I can, absolutely. And I think it's a very easy short-term solution. I don't think it addresses the larger pictures of food security, energy security.
Henry Astor. The Department for Energy Security and Net Zero maintains that only 0.4% of UK land will be put under solar panels. Johnny Wake, who farms in South Northamptonshire and South Norfolk, told me he doesn't believe that small percentage is a problem. even if it's on productive land, which could be used for food.
This is where I tend to diverge from quite a lot of farmers who think that it's an absolute disgrace if you take really productive land out of production for solar panels. Clearly, we don't want it to all be productive land. If we can do grade 3 or grade 4 land, we absolutely should. But if the grid access happens to be on more productive land, I don't personally have a problem with us using that. I lean on the side of the argument where I don't actually feel some kind of innate duty to produce food. I am a land manager, and if I want to be asked to look after things for nature or the local community as well as producing food, I am very comfortable having a blend of activities on my land.
Farmer Johnny Wake. As the impact of the war in the Middle East is felt on world markets, there are concerns about the cost and availability of fuel and fertilizer. This time of year, when spring planting is underway, both are in high demand. Svein Holsetter is the chief executive of Yara International. It's the world's second largest fertilizer company. He told the BBC that the Strait of Hormuz, where ships have been under threat of attack from Iran, is the most important shipping lane for fertilizer in the world. Each year, around a third of the world's supply of urea, a key ingredient for fertilizer, passes through the channel.
We are still in the early days here, but it already had an impact on prices for fertilizers. Now that there has been significant increases in world prices for fertilizers, so that's already visible. We saw that in 2022 following Russia's war on Ukraine, how quickly this spills into food prices and food availability. And as always, it's the most vulnerable that pay the highest price in this.
Patrick Crean is Fuels Procurement Director for the AF Group, which works with thousands of farmers across the UK. He told Anna Hill his customers are concerned about fuel.
The first and foremost worry is price. Most of the questions are price related, but some of them are also availability related. The lead times that previously we had, in certain areas, we were taking the order and getting it delivered within 2 to 3 days. It appears for, large parts of the country, especially here in East Anglia, we're looking at 10 days, 2 weeks to take an order and get it delivered. So it is a concern. But for now, there isn't anything telling us that we think that we're going to be out of diesel or running short.
So your message to farmers who are worried is don't panic.
No, don't panic. Talk to us. The likelihood is this will plateau. This will ease. Yes, the first week tends to be the worst week and we tend to see the most drama, but hopefully the things will sort themselves out relatively quickly.
So we have had price spikes before. Last time Ukraine happened. How does this compare?
The price increase that we're seeing is far greater than what we saw with the invasion from Russia into Ukraine. It doesn't help that 20% of the world's crude oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So this may just take a little longer than before to settle down and to see prices fall back to potentially where they were before.
And is that price rise being passed on to consumers and to farmers now, or is there a lag?
There's a lag, but it's mainly if you've placed your order from Monday onwards, the likelihood is you're going to pay a lot more by the time it's delivered. We know for a fact that the fuel distributors in the UK, a lot of them are not offering pricing and they're just taking an order and you will be priced when it gets delivered.
So they're not locking in prices?
I'm afraid that seems to be the case at the moment. Because of the level of increases, they just aren't willing to gamble on what that price increase is going to be by the time they've physically got the product delivered. And also the fact that they may suffer availability issues at the terminal when collecting. So it's difficult for them to quote for a delivery that may not take place for potentially a couple of weeks.
With fertiliser, also affected by the disruption in the Middle East, farmers often buy quite early and have it in the shed already, won't they?
They will. The fertiliser market is very fluid with prices being issued daily at the moment. There are good stocks in the UK currently. So really at the moment the focus is on getting the fertiliser onto the farm and fulfilling the existing orders.
Patrick Crean there from AF Group. All next week on Farming Today, we will be looking at fertilisers, what farmers use and how that's changing. That's every weekday morning at 5:45 here on BBC Radio 4 or, of course, on BBC Sounds at a more civilised hour of your choosing. The first UK trial of a vaccine for avian flu started this week. Avian influenza has had a massive impact across the world over the past few years. Currently, here in the UK, all commercial farms have to keep birds inside to try to protect them. The disease is spread by wild birds and the risk is highest when they're migrating. There have been 95 outbreaks in the UK since last autumn. Bird flu costs the government an average of £174 million every year. While other countries have used vaccination to try to control the disease, 5 vaccines are licensed for use in the European Union, but not here in the UK, hence this trial. It'll see 1,000 turkeys vaccinated, and if successful, the vaccine may be rolled out to turkeys and ducks. But as we'll hear, the cost of the vaccine and the surveillance testing afterwards means chickens probably won't be included. The field trial is being run for the government on 3 farms run by Mark Gorton from traditional Norfolk Poultry, who spoke to Alex Dunlop of BBC Look East.
Oh, this is a momentous day for us and for the whole industry. This has been many, many years coming. Arguably, it's been too long coming, but we are here now, and it's fantastic that we're doing this. And this is really the start of what will hopefully be the end of this devastating disease that we've all suffered from over the last 20-odd years.
So we're looking at 3 sites across East Anglia, 1,000 birds, a trial that's going to last 24 weeks. When will they be vaccinated? How often will they get a booster?
So the birds will be vaccinated a day old and then again a few weeks later. But this is the interesting part of this trial because we need to understand how long the vaccine works in the birds and how long it will protect them, which is also one of the reasons why we're keeping the birds for so long on our farms to study that reaction.
Traditional Norfolk Poultry is leading the trial. Why were you picked? Why did you step up to the plate?
We've been campaigning for this for many, many years, and we've suffered ourselves with this disease and lost many, many farms and many, many hundreds of thousands of birds to it. We've seen this as the only answer to this. We've seen it happen when we had COVID a few years ago, and we know vaccination will be the answer. It's been a long time coming, but we're here now, and this is really a positive step.
Do you think we're still a bit behind the curve? In France, they regularly vaccinate ducks. Elsewhere in the world, they vaccinate chickens.
Yes, we are behind the curve on this, hence the reason why we've been campaigning so hard. Yeah, under the current guidelines, the surveillance requirements are massively cost inhibitive for us to do it. So that is a big blocker at the moment. We need to get that sorted out. We need to find a more cost-effective way to test these birds once they've been vaccinated.
Is that another way of saying you want more government financial support in the surveillance and testing?
Absolutely. This is costing the government a massive amount now, so there's no reason why the government shouldn't be helping us to subsidise this.
When, with the following wind, would you hope to see turkeys being vaccinated regularly in this country?
Well, we're running this trial now, but we're not going to stop campaigning and pushing to get this vaccine introduced into the UK. In reality, it's not going to happen for this year, but we will be pushing for it to happen as soon as possible and hopefully next year.
Mark Gorton. Well, the Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer, Ellie Brown, spoke to Anna about the trial.
We're splitting the project on farm, so we're going to really test the on-farm use of the avian influenza vaccines, but also then bring them in, of course, to controlled laboratory conditions to challenge them. So we'll also then be able to check the efficacy, the effectiveness of these vaccines in turkeys.
Why don't we use vaccines which are already available?
The challenge that we have in terms of using them, delivering them, is we need to test alongside giving the vaccines, and that makes it quite challenging to use. So it's not a straightforward decision. What we're hoping is that by targeting vaccine at the turkeys, which is a really important sector for the UK, that that might have the best possibility in the future for that sort of cost-benefit case of using these vaccines.
But then again, the EU vaccines have already been tested and they've already gone through the whole process of approval. So why don't we use those?
Yeah, so some are licensed for turkeys, but not all. Across Europe, different countries are looking at the use of these vaccines in different species. So France has been vaccinating ducks. I know other countries are testing in chickens. We're interested in turkeys as a particularly important sector for us. And there's less use and less evidence of some of these vaccines in that species. So this is a really useful study to increase our understanding of the usefulness and deliverability of these vaccines that we could then take forward with industry and the task force.
I think a lot of people in the poultry industry have been asking for vaccines for several years now. They'll be very happy you're starting a trial in turkeys, but they possibly will be scratching their heads and saying, hang on a minute, why aren't we doing what other countries do and just vaccinate our chickens?
Yeah, so we have focused on turkeys, you're right, for the reasons I've said. They're a really important sector for us, but also there's less evidence on the effectiveness of these vaccines in that species. There's emerging evidence all the time. It's a really rapidly changing environment. Some of the vaccines that we're using are pretty new. So we will be looking at the evidence from use of these vaccines in other poultry species, like chickens, through the task force. And we expect the task force to update their thinking and their findings and publish that this summer. So I think that will be a key part of our thinking about how we use vaccines. It's not just turkeys. We're doing the study in turkeys, but we absolutely will be looking at all species when we consider how do we use these tools going forward.
Ellie Brown, the Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer. The British Poultry Council's Technical Director, Maura Burnett, told me that vaccinating birds has an impact on trade because of fears that vaccinated birds may hide the disease and so spread it, and that, along with the cost, means mass vaccination of UK chickens is unlikely.
We see the vaccination as an additional tool to control avian influenza. It's not the silver bullet, and nor is it a substitute for biosecurity. So good biosecurity still remains the first line of defence against avian influenza, but we see vaccination as a positive step forward. But we need everyone at a domestic and at a global level to come to the table on this subject, because vaccination shouldn't be a barrier to trade. But we have seen that, particularly when the French started vaccinating, they're still facing trade restrictions, and we have to avoid that at all costs.
How would you imagine, then, it being used here in the UK if you don't imagine that we just vaccinate everything?
The Joint Industry Government Task Force published its report last year, and part of that was to do a cost-benefit analysis. And the outcome of that showed that turkeys and ducks would benefit from a vaccination programme. They are also disproportionately being affected by AI in the last few years.
And is that because chickens just aren't worth as much?
Seasonal turkeys in particular do have a higher value, and also they're longer-lived birds, as are ducks, but also laying hens and broiler breeders, for example, or any breeding bird, could also benefit from a vaccination programme because of the length of the life cycle of the bird. But it all comes down to the surveillance costs, which are very, very high at the moment because we have to follow the EU's requirements on surveillance. But before, we roll out a sort of a vaccination programme, the costs of which would have to be borne by the industry, we need to ensure that the vaccines are effective, and we also need assurances that there's no risk to our trade.
Do you know how much it would cost per bird to both vaccinate and then do all the follow-up tests?
I don't know by bird, but the task force cost-benefit analysis showed that the cost to the whole poultry industry would be around £250 million. The majority of that cost is actually the surveillance. The vaccine dose itself is relatively cost effective, but it's the level of surveillance that's required, and also the lab capacity to actually sample all the tests coming in. But what we've seen in France is that the French government subsidised the surveillance programme. I don't think we're going to see that here in the UK. The cost will have to be borne by the industry.
What about the welfare of these birds? We've seen how awful avian flu can be, particularly if it gets into these bird houses. Is there not an argument that says you should be doing everything you can to protect those birds?
Yeah, the industry is doing everything it can. It has, very good biosecurity in place to protect the health and the welfare of the birds. But unfortunately, this disease is highly virulent, and despite all the efforts of the industry, we're still seeing an increase in cases, particularly this season. So vaccination can be a tool alongside good biosecurity to protect our flocks.
But it just isn't realistic to expect that in the future we will vaccinate all chickens.
I don't see that we will vaccinate all chickens, but I think certain sectors of the poultry sector will take up the option to vaccinate if the findings of the trial are positive.
Maura Burnett from the British Poultry Council. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.